Connecticut. Here's a look at our convention center. It's getting a little gray outside, but things are quite colorful in here with all the different kinds of decks we have, and it's going to be an exciting, fun time. Here's a look at our tournament hall. Players are getting through their second round of today. We had a total of 1,247 entrants in attendance. Half of them remain undefeated, right around 605. And we have a lot of rounds left to do today. We have 7 more today before 2 more tomorrow. Asala, what do you think of our first round?
It was really interesting to see Libromancer. That was not a deck I expected to see, but I guess it's one of those new tactics that you get out of Dimension Force where there's so many things you can do. There's so many things that you haven't explored. Benton going to 2 is something we didn't even get to talk about in the Forbidden Limit list. There's just so much that you can do in this tournament right now, Robbie. I'm excited to see what we can still see in the rest of this tournament.
Yep, and speaking of which, our duels are ready for our second round, so we will see exactly what we're going to see in this one right here. And here we are. Here's our first player of the second round. This is Jonathan. He's from East Windsor, New Jersey. Favorite card, Illusion of Chaos, a newer one, but sort of classic feeling at the same time, right? Definitely a powerful one. Let's go ahead and look at our second duels. See exactly. Yep, this is John. He's from Toronto, Canada. Neo the Magic Swordsman favorite card. That is a cool old one. 1700 light vanilla, I think, right? Warrior monster. Definitely a classic one for those duels. Have probably been collecting when they were a kid, right? Like you always just sort of had one in the back of a box or something. It's a cool looking card.
That's straight out of the Yugi starter deck. That is as far back as you can go.
Yep, it's gonna be a good one. So we have Jonathan versus John. I just realized their names are so incredibly similar, but it should be an exciting match. We know that Jonathan, at the very least, is on Plunder Patrol, right?
Yeah, that's the one we knew for sure. John sometimes goes by the name of Alec. He is a dragon duelist, very popular within the scene. He's been typically playing strategies such as Eldritch, but here we're not really sure. It's a brand new Forbidden Limited list, a lot of new options. He might be on something along the lines of Tarion. He might just stick to the tried and true of the Despia and the Sword Soul. I think he generally gravitates towards those stronger tried and true strategies, so I feel like I'd expect him to be more on something along the lines of Despia.
It's always interesting when they make a full left out outfield turn sort of thing, but it'll be interesting to see exactly how this plays out, especially knowing that this is a going second deck, right? In itself, so whether or not he wins or loses that die roll kind of doesn't matter game 1, right? Because if you expect to lose it, you're already going second. If you win it, you're going to choose to go second. Kind of the big reason to play these going second strategies is that first duel you've already won in some capacity in terms of the die roll at least.
Yeah, especially if you do get to play against those decks that you truly plan for, which is the Despia, the Sword Souls, the decks that can be really potent going first, but more so are a little bit fair. You can play into them. They plan to just grind you out and try to win off sheer advantage. However, if John is on something that is a little bit more combo heavy, tries to do something turn 1 that establishes a board that cannot be broken, that is where Jonathan will really struggle. So he has to really hope that he's on something a little bit more tried and true, as we mentioned earlier.
That'll be interesting, right? Because at that point it just lines up how many sort of board break cards do I have versus how many disruption pieces you have, right? And especially because these going second decks sometimes don't play a ton of hand effects. They're really about just breaking what you've done rather than stopping you.
Yeah, honestly, way more potent when it does work out. I personally like relying on those kind of cards way more than interruptions from the hand because they're so inconsistent as to when you have them. Being able to rely on the 6 card as well is extremely nice, but the one flaw is when games are just too strong.
Yep, and with that, we're going to go ahead down to the first game of our second round. It looks like the Plunder Patrol player is the one who won the die roll and chose to go second. So John on the bottom will be going first with Rite of Arms here. So still don't know exactly what he's playing, but he has at least Adventurer cards. Oh, it's Adventurer Dragon Link. That's the deck he is on.
Ooh, that actually works extremely well in Jonathan's favor. That is a little bit more combo heavy, but it's one of those types of decks where trying to use those interruptions from the hand that are so extremely popular, like the Ash Blossoms, the Ghost Sugars, they are strong, but they are not nearly as strong as the potential board-breaking type cards, such as Evenly Matched, Mystic Mind, things like that, where you can play into the field, because the Dragon Link deck is so strong at making the field through any type of interruption, but the field itself is not that crazy, and you can deal with it with a couple of powerful spell cards like the ones we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, you've touched on this a lot before, right? Like Dragon Link's sort of evolution, right? It went from like super combo heavy to much more like mid-rangey how it feels now, right? Like it has a bunch of very powerful cards. You have things like the level 8 sync of the Chaos Ruler, right? It just sort of ekes out advantage, but it still has access to other powerful things, right? Like the Rose Dragon inclusion has been big, the Adventurer inclusion has been big, but big thing is he's going to have a face-up token, and if Jonathan has evenly matched, right, and like a way to sort of deal with whatever negate, that's going to be a big one. And it looks like he does have the evenly matched in his hand already.
Yeah, so this really depends on what variation of the combo John is going to go for. He does have the ideal opening of Red Rose here as well as Red Rose Dragon, even though Red Rose newly limited doesn't stop him from seeing it. And yeah, so from here, you can see, okay, he's opting to go for the token in the Red Rose. He could have opted to make Baron de Fleur with the Red Rose and the Griffin, but still keeping up both those bodies, going for Riser first, opting to play around an effect, something along the lines of Ash Blossom here.
Yep, and that Riser Dragon is going to go ahead and sit down. Let's see exactly what he chooses. Popular choice here with Fairy Tale Snow, right? The typical one. Another card that, not off the most recent Forbidden Loom list, but has seen substantial amount of play since it came back, right? Not the same dominating power it was in a format with, like, that grass look screener, right? But still definitely a strong one. It looks like he's going to go ahead and sink away his Rose Dragon with the Wandering Griffin Rider for a Baron.
Yeah, opting to go for this order. Lexi plays around a couple interruptions in a different way than if he had led with the Baron. So, choosing to make his plays very carefully here. And he does have the White Dragon Wyvern Burster as well. So, extremely powerful line here from John. Oh, and those are two dragons. Let's see if he goes for Hieratic Seal or, actually, Christian Halki Fibrex. Shooting Riser is, in fact, a tuner.
Yeah. One of those unique tuner synchro monsters, right? Incredibly good with Christian Halka Fibrex in two ways, right? Like either into him or out from him.
Yeah, it's a lot rare that you see him turning into the Fibrex, but in this situation, it could be proving quite strong.
Use the rocket synchron to then.
Yeah, so off that Halka Fibrex, he's going to get Rocket Synchron. Also gets to search the Collapse Serpent from his deck thanks to the Wyvern Burster. After that, he's going to make Dragon Link's favorite Link 1, Striker Dragon. Going to use its effect, grab their Rocket Field spell from his deck to his hand.
Yep, Bootsucker launch. Now, we don't know of any other rocket monsters immediately in hand, but we do have Basil to get back another dragon from the graveyard. So this actually is something we don't see very often, but the arrows are available to make Guard Dragon Pisty live.
Yeah, like back in the day, like we're talking LP Pisty, right? Ooh, match made in heaven. Pisty's still very powerful, right? But you don't always have the ability to do this, right? A little bit more unique now.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's considered a little bit greedier because it's usually very unprotected. But seeing as the Baron de Fleur is right by its side, ready to make sure you protect yourself from something along the lines of Ghost Ogre or Nibiru the Primal Being, this Guard Dragon Pisty, the last surviving Guard Dragon Link monster, is likely to resolve and potentially get you much further. Just wondering what kind of end field we're going to look at here. Typically, when you see a Christian Halki Fibrex these days, you're usually wanting to stick it on the field, trying to turn it into something along the lines of TG Wonder Magician on your opponent's turn to potentially trigger an artifact Dagda that you can put on your field as well. But seeing as how this is a Dragon Link strategy, I'm not sure if that's entirely what you're going to go for. Oh, and it looks like Striker Dragon was used to actually destroy the Christian Halki Fibrex to add back the Rocket Synchron off the effect of Striker Dragon.
Trigger Unite Romulus, use the effects.
This is a very interesting play because it does open up the extra monster zone, allowing John to be able to end on a Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres in that extra monster zone, where it's able to use its effect to get that add back to hand effect, right? To tribute and then put a face-up card back in the hand.
It's another point of disruption, right? That this deck, but a more fair one in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like it seems fair at first, but then the amount of value that you get off of it, because not only does it add back the card, but it still summons another dragon from the deck. Which anything that summons from the deck, Robbie, that's gonna always cause some kind of problem. The zero attack seems so friendly at first.
Yeah, the first thing I do when I look at Heavenly Spheres, I'm like, you look friendly. First immediate thought. And he's going to go ahead and activate Dragon Ravine, Ditch Dragon to send down another, and then he's going to activate the Boot Sector launch, special summon Tracer alongside with the Synchron.
And I will use the effect of
This play feels so streamlined from how the play started. It seems like every single piece was just added from that right and Aramasir combo. Or sorry, not right and Aramasir, but right Aramasir as well as Red Rose Dragon. Being able to add the Rocket Synchron back off, that was summoned off the Hockey Firebrax using Striker Dragon, and then getting to the Tracer via Dragon Ravine. Everything here has just been accessed via this original combo.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. At one point, it looked real complicated, right? Like, oh, this isn't normal. But now we've sort of like reeled it back in terms of what Dragon Link tries to do best, which is to, like, put up these points of like Baron and Hieratic Giant Sphere, and put up spheres and just have like a solid amount of advantage, being able to like deal with what your opponent does, but not trying to go like too big.
Yeah, so it's so interesting how Dragon Link is always able to do that, right? It's so surprising how it gets there, but it still always ends up somewhere like this.
summon.
So it looks like he is going to Synchro Summon with the Hot Red as well, or with the Chaos Ruler, as well as the Rocket Synchron into, I assume, is Hot Red Dragon Abyss, or maybe it's a Link Summon for something along the lines of IP Masquerena, or even a Rocket, or Quad World Dragon, rather. Looks like John is really contemplating his options, leaning towards the Hot Red Dragon Abyss. Yep, there it is. One of the best cards into something along the lines of Lightning Storm, Evenly Matched, and the like, because you're able to negate the effect but not the activation, so you get to play around the second copy. Alright, looks like that is enough here. So let's take a tally here. We have the Hieratic Seal that is able to bounce a card on either side of the field face up. We have the Hot Red Dragon Abyss, which is able to negate any face up card on the field, as well as Baron Defer that is able to negate any individual card's activation. And we can't forget about the Fairy Tale Snow that was put in the grave in the very beginning of the turn.
So 4 points.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 4 points of disruption here from the Dragon Link deck. It looks like the first thing that Jonathan's going to do is try to kick off this evenly matched by moving straight to the battle phase.
Right. We're going to meet that with the Hot Red Dragon Abyss, playing around the second copy of Evenly Match as well. Also, a lot better against a potential copy of Mystic Mine. Want to keep the Baron for that kind of thing, not the Hot Red Dragon Abyss, because the Hot Red Dragon Abyss, because it doesn't negate the activation, it will leave it on the field, so it doesn't actually solve the problem.
Yeah, super heads up. Because that's definitely a card that Jonathan does have access to, and we see it in a lot of the going second decks as well, right? Like something you can kind of expect.
Yeah, absolutely one of the most popular forms of interaction into these fields, rather than trying to stop them from happening, is just slapping down a Mystic Mine and just trying to make sure your opponent doesn't have any kind of out to it. But we do have the Baron de Fleur right now, so that should be a very good way of getting out of this one, assuming there isn't a second copy. John does get the reveal that it is actually, in fact, Plunder Patrol by getting the Plunder Patrol field spell.
The jig is up. All the cards are on the table at this point. So both duels very aware of what they're playing. It looks like he's going to respond with the spheres to bounce the Mystic Mine back, just so that he can get that dragon from his deck. Let's see which one he chooses.
Yeah, interesting choice, because he will have to use the Baron on the Mystic Mine activating again. Oh, actually, no, that's actually very heads up. He cannot activate the Mystic Mine because of set rotation. There is no other field spell that can be activated while that other field spell is still face down on John's side. Very heads up play by John. See, it comes immediately.
Yeah, exactly. He knew exactly that. Well, when Jonathan didn't, right? That's the sad part, but it's okay. As you mentioned, incredible play from there by John. And now the actual Plunder Patrol monsters are going to come down.
Unfortunately, there are only 2 of them that are able to immediately tag out into their ships from the extra deck, and Bluebeard is not one of them.
On the summon, I'll activate Fairy Tale Snow in the graveyard. advantage for the
John, ever the cautious one, going to just go ahead and set it with the Fairy Tale Snow immediately, not giving any chance to turn that into any body of importance. Likely going to be turning into an Almirage if it wasn't for this Fairy Tale Snow, assuming it did have the stats under 1,000 attack.
on the summon.
Sequence of plays really shows just the amount of experience John has at his age playing this game. He might look young, but he's for sure a veteran.
Yeah, I mean, definitely pushing with that advantage, right? Like, just making sure that I was able to do this big thing, and that's it. But as you mentioned, like, no chance, right? Like, overly cautious is a word to use, but definitely a strong opening there for the Dragon League player. And takes, like, an impressive game one over Plunder Patrol. Although, like, Plunder Patrol played maybe, like, evenly matched that rotation, normal summon a monster, so...
Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of what you expect, or that is exactly what Plunder Patrol wants to be doing in this situation. It wants to have a Plunder monster. It wants to have at least 1 to 2 forms of interaction into a field, and we had a Mystic Mine, we had an evenly matched. Those are some of the best ones into the current state, but the board that John made was designed to beat something along those lines. Just really solid coverage, and again, it was one of those decks that I think Jonathan was trying to avoid. He would much rather play against something like Despia, which normally doesn't have any kind of actual cards that negate, or something like Swordflow, which only has access to 1.
Makes sense, right? Like, you take the, sort of like the metagame pick. Sometimes, though, in a YCS, like, it's a wide field, especially now, right? After the recent Forbidden Limitless changes and Dimension Force, like, there's a lot of different decks you can play.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I was helping some of my friends prepare for this event, we were at a loss because you could, on one end, play something like Jonathan and just really prepare for the most popular decks, but you have to assume that it will not be the entire representation of the tournament. There are just so many new decks that you can come and face against, including something along the lines of this Dragon League deck, which, honestly, like, not even anything new that we saw. It's just a combination of good dragon cards, a Rite of Aramis-Seer, just cards that we've seen be successful in this deck time and time again. Really such an open format right now.
Some people would argue that's, like, the most exciting point Yu-Gi-Oh gets to, right? It's, like, right at that beginning.
It's both some of the most exciting and some of the most daunting. It's so troublesome to try to figure out what you're supposed to do in these situations.
Daunting for some, so daunting for some.
How can I possibly side for all these decks? So now that Jonathan has knowledge of what John is up to and the kind of boards that he's going to make, what do you think he sides? Do you think he changes his game plan? Do you think he still wants to go second?
That's a good question. I feel like it would be hard for me to think that he doesn't choose to go second unless he's bringing in, like, a lot of things that are very strong going first. You know what I mean? Especially with just how Plunder Patrol sort of operates, like, it feels very much like a going second deck. So unless you're bringing in, like, a bunch of strong trap cards or cards to potentially, like, sort of quote-unquote flood your opponent out, right? Like, I feel like it's still probably going second, and then maybe it just brings in some additional, like, we talk about the whole strategy for going second is usually, like, breaking a board rather than disrupting it. Like, maybe he just brings in some, like, additional, like, disruption pieces, right? Like, hand effects or similar. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that basically makes sense. If his deck is already built so much for just choosing to go second, I don't think he can reasonably side into a way that could make his deck function going first. And I think if he, like, sides in some additional going second cards, maybe something along the lines of Nibiru the Primal Being, a card that historically has been extremely powerful against the Dragon Link strategy, that could pair really well with some of the other cards he's had, although it does conflict with cards like Mystic Mine, Lightning Storm, and Evenly Matched, so a little bit to consider, but maybe he can hope that it either just turns off the field entirely, or it's something that he will deal with on his own, and it will simply deal with enough of the interruptions that might stay on the field that you get one of the other powerful spells to stick.
Do you think after that game one, he keeps in Mystic Mine?
That's a good question. I am not entirely sure. I think there are enough baits in the strategy that it is worth keeping it in, unless there are strictly better cards in its side deck to account for it.
Well, you talk about, like, Nombos with something like Nibiru the Primal Being, right? But it'll be interesting to see, and we'll see exactly how that plays out in the second game of round 2. Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series, Hartford, Connecticut. John took a very strong game one. Yep, and so it looks like Jonathan chose for him to go second once again. So John will be going first. He's going to start things off with Water Enchantress of the Temple, using its effect to banish itself. He's going to grab Rites of Armiseer from his deck. Probably going to slap it right down. Yep, there it is. Gets himself that token plus the Faithful Adventure continuous spells straight from the deck to the Spell or Trap cards on face up.
Yep, very familiar opening from John, and we do see from Jonathan's hand again the Evenly Match as well as the Mystic Mine. It looks like we're leading with the Legal Knight this time.
And we were talking a little bit earlier about Illegal Knight versus some of the other ones. So what are the benefits of playing a card like Illegal Knight?
Honestly, so you get the extra on-field disruption, which is something that the Wandering Griffin doesn't really give you access to. It's more of a strictly negate type of card, which, you know, they have their merits either way. But Illegal Knight is just another level 7, and we saw in this combo alone, it didn't matter what Griffin's effect was, it was just a level 7 body on the field, so just having more of those allows you more ways to start. See, this is actually exactly what he needs. It was a free extender, and where a tuner such as Effect Veiler, which is normally just an interruption from the hand, is allowed to turn into Crystal Halqifibrax, which will more than likely be summoning Red Rose Dragon from the deck and be able to do a very similar combo that we saw game 1.
So it's like sort of having like a redundant Wandering Griffin Rider, basically, right? Because in Wandering Griffin Rider, as you mentioned, sometimes it's just an extender. Sometimes it's all it needs to be. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's an extender with a different name, so you're allowed to use both, which is exactly what he did here.
I see. So yeah, after some Link and Secret Summonings, he's going to end up with Crystal Halqifibrax, Baron, Blur, a token, and he's going to go ahead and grab the other dragon from his deck before he searches the Basil Rose Shoot.
Yep, and then the Rocks Rose as well as the Adventure token, going into what I can only assume is Shooting Riser. There she is.
Yep, that's going to use its effect. Likely kick down Fairy Tale Snow once again.
Yep. Fairy Tale Snow actually extremely powerful into the Plunder Patrol strategy. If you are able to set the Plunder Patrol monster, assuming it's not one of the ones that immediately turns into a ship from the extra deck, you're able to really hold the deck at bay, because it needs to be able to turn one Plunder Patrol monster and any other monster into Blackbeard from the extra deck to actually get its plays going, assuming you don't have a Redbeard or Whitebeard already. But now we don't have access to the Rocket Synchron, which gave John his immediate play earlier, simply because the Halqifibrax had to summon the Red Rose in this instance. But assuming everything else remains the same in this play, that only means that instead of having the Hot Red Dragon Abyss, you are having to go into the Chaos Ruler and just a little bit more reliant on the cards that you send to graveyard off its effect. Not necessarily guaranteeing that extra point of interaction, but you will still have a bunch of bodies to turn into something along the lines of IP Masquerena or just other potential cards in your extra deck. So we'll see how different this play ends up being.
Yep, he's going to go ahead and Link summon his Dragoon Unite to grab Dragon's Ravine from his deck. Play that one next. We'll see what he chooses to discard. Maybe Foolish. Ooh, is that 2 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance?
That is 2 copies of Anti-Spell, eliminating a lot of the options that Jonathan might have to deal with the board.
If you discard one, you have to be telling your opponent that you basically have a second copy, though, right? Like,
absolutely, but what is he going to do about it?
Anything he could do about it, though, would probably not be as good against 2 of them.
Yeah,
yeah, right.
Correct, yeah.
Maybe like Twin Twister is one that's probably going to be just as good against 2 than 1, but other than that, not much.
It has to feel really awful for Jonathan to face down an anti-spell, knowing there's a Baron there to protect it.
Yeah.
So we do know this combo is going to be inherently different from the one we saw previously, simply because he opted to keep the Halqifibrax on the board, so we know we're not ending on Hieratic Seal. And it looks like he's just going to Synchro straight. I wonder if he's going to skip the Chaos Ruler and just try to get another negate. Nope, just going for the Chaos Ruler. That effect is honestly just too strong to miss out on. Oh, there's a Rocket Synchron if you wanted to, a third anti-spell. Yep. Only add there is the Rocket Synchron. No really beneficial other effects there sent to the graveyard.
If you're Jonathan, you just have to be sort of like praying that both those anti-spells are just the only ones he has, right? Just look at that hand. Is that 4 spells in an Elite match?
Yeah, it definitely is. Oh, this is a card we haven't seen yet. This is a card from Ghost from the Past 2, Boral and Dragon.
And I'll be using the effect to target the Chaos Ruler and the Tracer.
This is a very extremely powerful card that this deck has been missing for quite some time. I know Dragon Link players have been really looking forward to the release of this card, and now they finally get to play it. I was wondering what Link monster he was going to make after already using the effect of Tracer. I was thinking Appaloosa, that's not a card you can make at this point when you're locked in darks, but Borland is definitely the ideal one. Able to summon a dragon monster back from the graveyard,
Link is here.
and then I believe this. Yes.
Masquerade.
Oh, going for IP Masquerade here.
Summon one card. Element. I do Pyrite. I guess one Vikings.
Andrew, another spell card.
All right. Well, at least for now, he still has the evenly matched, as well as okay. There is a droplet, so if you just chain the droplet to the anti-spell, you're able to resolve the evenly matched.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to, right?
Yeah.
There's no way.
It's going to be interesting which card John keeps in this situation.
What do you think? Do you think it's IP? Do you think it's...
I don't think it's IP of all of them. I think the Baron will be used here to try to negate the Forbidden Droplet, because there's no reason not to, considering there's going to be no monsters given up for it. But then I think he just, oddly enough, I don't know if he keeps the anti-spell, but it's more than likely that he would, because he does still have the snow in the graveyard to cover the normal summon.
That makes sense.
But he doesn't have much after that, is the main issue. The Fateful Adventure can go ahead and find another Enchantress, start that engine again.
Well, not if he gets evenly bred.
That is true.
He has his graveyard, right? Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Any sort of effects in his graveyard is what's really gonna, like, get him through, but...
Yes. Chaos Ruler is able to come back as well. Evenly matched, always coming in and out of formats, but truly proving its power here in this match right now.
Daniel Torrio, Sean Flores Camacho, please come to the scorekeeper.
Tough decision here for John. Exactly what you mentioned, right? Oh, it looks like the anti-spell is going to be the one he chooses to keep.
Understanding how many powerful spells are in a strategy like Plunder Patrol. If John doesn't manage to apply enough pressure, though, on this following turn, Jonathan might just be able to flip his spells and do everything he wants to.
Yeah, and the fact that he had 2 copies of Field Spell, right, means that he's extra slow.
Yeah.
Effects to target.
Oh, there was just a Rocket Synchron hand. That's extremely powerful one. Able to summon back any of the level 7 or higher dragons in his graveyard. And it goes, like if he wants, he could just summon, in this case, the Apsarautor and the Synchron go into Warlord Savage Dragon, which gets even more interruptions for your opponent, as well as being a very large monster that tied with the Chaos Ruler coming back as well. And the snow, that might just be enough damage.
I mean, even if it isn't,
Super Summon.
Jonathan is still just so far behind with this anti-spell, right?
Royal Savage. I'm going to Chili One Savage.
He will be able to use the Plunder Patrol ship, like the shipyard, as well as the Fateful Adventure next turn, assuming he gets to a next turn. But into a Savage, that's not really going to do very much.
How does anti-spell interact with, like, Wright's armors here trying to get to the Fateful Adventure face-up?
Right places them on the field, so he is allowed to do so. Very interesting one.
Yeah.
Always have to look for the difference between activate and place. Right is one of those cards where they really wanted to make it as good, as strong as possible, and it puts it right on the field.
I'll banish the Shooting Branch Dragon and the Project Mystic.
Sure. Yep, so that Warlord Savage Dragon is gaining half of the Hockey Firex stats, so that is at 3750. So 3750 plus 3000 plus 1850. That sounds like enough.
John clearly smells blood. He's going for it, which, he has to, especially with a card like Anti-Spell Fragrance, right? More like a tempo-based card, like, doesn't exactly lock your opponent out, but gives you time, right? He's taking advantage of that time.
Yeah, puts your opponent in a position where they have to deal with everything that you're doing right now, and they essentially pass with nothing. But if you give them a turn again, then they can start using everything that they've held back. So, making as much opportunity here to go for that game shot, avoiding any real interaction that could possibly be there. It's not like you're not safe, right? You do have the Savage.
Yeah. He also has the options, right? Like, even if he didn't give him this turn, he could have done something like destroy the set spells as well. Like, you just get so much advantage off that card. And that's it. You know, John takes a very impressive 2-0 victory with Adventurer Dragon Link.
Yeah, extremely convincing gameplay here we saw from John. Some expertise on how to pilot his strategy, knows how he wants to end his game. And I think that it just shows the amount of versatile strategies you could play. The strategy that Jonathan had was not a faulty one. It was definitely going to do well against the Despias and the Sword Soul meta, but you get decks like this and it doesn't always work out for you. And, you know, we'll just kind of have to be extra excited to see the rest of the decks that we get to see in this tournament.
That we will. We're going to cut to a quick commercial break, and then we're going to go ahead and have an interview with our winner, John. Make sure to stay tuned.